Hello everyone, and welcome to a Create with Kiely art tutorial video. In this video, we will be playing around with watercolor paints combined with illustration pens. These two medias work really well together. They complement each other and you get some really nice effects. So we're going to complete 4 artistic paintings. This is my preliminary work. We're going to do it again. I just wanted to show you, give you an idea of our end goal. If you want to express thanks, please click on the like button and share with your friends. Now let's get creative. To begin, you want to choose a fresh spread in your sketchbook where there's no artwork on the back and nothing important's going on the back of the other side too. So we've got a nice fresh spread and we're going to take our masking tape or our painter's tape and we are going to create a border around the outside edge and one border through the middle so that we have 4 rectangles worth of space to paint in. So you don't want to place the tape down on your paper raw off the roll. You really need to de-stick the tape quite a bit by applying it to your clothes. And that will take some of the stickiness off. This will help prevent your paper from tearing when you peel the tape off later. Make sure that tape is pressed down nicely so we don't get any watercolor underneath it, and we are ready to begin. If you're working with liquid paint, you can pour your colors onto a palette, or if you're working with pre-dried paint, you can get that out as well. The first one we are going to complete is just a series of feathers. Don't worry too much about getting a perfect looking feather because they're so organic that they kind of happen on their own. What I want you to do with this one is make sure that there's feathers coming off all 4 sides. And I like mine going in one direction. So we'll just start with one over here. Feathers have a stem and then they get wider as they move across the page. And then they come to a point. But they don't all have to have this same shape. So we can have a bit of a variety. And put a little bit of fluff down here. And you can let these things become your own. You don't necessarily have to copy me. I'm going to try to keep the center of the feather light or white of the page. Do a couple layers to intensify the saturation. Maybe try some bleeding and let colors mix organically on their own. And remember, you want to get them to come off the edge of the tape so they can be cut off. And the thing about this one is you may not like it in the beginning, especially if you're a beginner and this is the first time you've ever had to paint feathers before. Don't worry, when we add that illustration pen, you'll get some really nice effects. So with feathers, you want to work from the center out. So your brush strokes should go from the center out. And you can put stripes if you wish, some stripy feathers. Create a little bit of interest. We're just going to leave that to dry. It's not even close to being finished yet, but we'll come back to that when we have our pen and ink, and then we may change a few things, but for now we'll let that one sit. So the next one, we're going to practice creating different flesh tones. So if you're in a palette, I want you to have a clean space for you to mix your colors in, and we are going to be working with the ochre, the red, and white, perhaps a little bit of brown as well, and we're going to try to get at least 4 different flesh tones so that you get the hang of mixing these things. So the wonderful thing about humans is that we are just different combinations of these flesh tones. So it's easier to go darker with watercolors than it is to go lighter, to bring lightness back into the colors. So we're going to start on the lighter side of things and we'll work our way around through from there. So I'm just bringing in the colors. I'm cleaning up my brush in between. It's also a good idea to have a scrap piece of paper handy to test out your colors before putting them on the paper. You don't want to have something that's really, really wrong and you slop it down on your paper and then you're stuck with it. That's not fun. So test it out, a little scrappy thing. There we go. All right. So once you have that, you have one of your colors, flesh tones that you're happy with, a lighter one. I want you to paint an egg shape with a bit more of a point at the end. And we'll go over to the side. We're going to try to get 4 people across. So have a pointy chin. And also a neck. So just bring it down. Don't worry about trying to make it look. It can be just a flat fill right now. So just worry about getting the color correct. That's the most important thing right now. So if you can make a shape that's like an egg and then have a cylinder coming off the egg, you're good to go. Make sure that the egg, if you didn't get a flat fill, make sure that the egg feels like it's on top of the cylinder. Okay, so we still have this flesh tone here. Let's try to bring it a little bit darker. Add in some brown. And really from this point, a lot of these are good. If it's looking a little too red, a little too plasticky, you can put some contrasting color, which is green, in there, and it will tone it down. It will remove the saturation and not make it feel so plastic. Since we're just focusing more on mixing the flesh tones, we're going to do very basic shaped faces. And in fact, they're going to be reminiscent of Byzantine style of illustrated manuscripts. If you are a grade 10 student and you're one of my grade 10 students and you're doing this activity, this is a preliminary activity for the culminating assignment where you do a self-portrait in a Byzantine style with medieval knotwork border. So this is a little bit of a taste test of what's to come. Ooh, exciting. If I use black paint to darken the color, it's going to make it so cold and unnatural feeling. So I'm going to avoid using black entirely. What I've done is I have added a bit more brown and some blue, and I've got a much lovelier, richer tone here. It's a nice, rich color of flesh. Try different combinations. As long as they're 4 distinct different ones, when you're going for flesh tones, it's really important to have a scrap piece of paper to figure out if you're getting it correct or not, if it looks plausible. If it's really wet, like shiny, like this is really wet, but by now this one's pretty dry, you can do the hair. And I'm not even drawing. Don't draw, don't pick up your pencils. You don't need them because we're just having fun here. I'm going to have a variety of hair colors. I like this vibrant orange. So when you're adding hair now, you can stay on the outside edge of the egg and then come down in a little bit. Give them a bit of a hairline is what I'm going at here. And then leave an ear. So just a flat fill is sufficient. You want the hair to come up off the egg. Just basic shapes. Don't fuss about eyes or noses or anything like that right now. You don't need to worry about it. We're going to put some clothes on these people. Again, just basic shapes, nothing too crazy. We're going to put some shirts on them so they're not just floating heads. Okay, next one, we're going to keep things just a little bit more simple, and I want you to paint very basic geometric shape. I'm going to balance out the colors in this overall piece by taking the orange that I used in the redhead's hair and bringing it over here. We want to overlap these trees, but we don't want the colors, the paint, to bleed into each other. So you have to wait for it to dry before you can paint right beside each other. Work on getting nice clean edges and good flat fills. This one I think you should start with a pencil, and we are going to be working on creating just some very basic, simple knot work. We're going to have 2 knots, and they're going to be in a pretzel shape. So we're going to have one about here and one about here, and it's going to be a continuous line. I want your pencils and your pretzels to draw very lightly. You see the pretzel? Look at how many times I'm going over it, and I'm not pushing hard. You can barely see it. Really light. If you want to practice this on your scrap piece of paper before jumping in here, this is the toughest one, and it's great if you've done it over a few times, because I want you to take your line and double it. So instead of just having 1, you're going to have 2. And now I've cinched up on my pencil a bit. I've got a more firmer controlled hold. I want my line work to be continuous. Still light. I'm not pushing hard, and I'm cleaning it up. I want the 2 lines to maintain the same distance between each other. So instead of just a single line, we are working towards getting a band, a ribbon. So it's about the thickness of my pencil, actually. Okay, so once you've got that done, we're going to play the over-under game. So how we play the over-under game is you come in from the left and you're going to go over. So take an eraser and clean up this inside of the band and make it look like it's going over the bottom part by erasing the crossing lines, the crisscrossing lines. So we're under, over, under. There we go. Now tidy up your pretzels, your double pretzels, and erase any of those hairy stray lines that are no good to you. They're just making your work look a little sloppy and messy, so get rid of those ones. Next thing I want you to do is create a background wash. I hope if you haven't done a wash and you don't know what I'm talking about, you should watch my other video about watercolor artistic techniques, and that will help you understand and practice what washes are. But a quick recap is you are going to water down a color. This one's going to have a really nice watery wash. And the nice thing about watercolors is that they are transparent when washed down. So I can see my pretzels, I'm painting right over them. It is so much easier to do it a wash, a background wash for this at this stage. Instead of trying to struggle and paint around the knots, I'm going to paint right over them, let this dry, and come back later and paint the knots themselves. Let's go back up to the feathers drawing, and we're going to put our watercolor stuff aside and pull out our illustration pens. Yay, illustration pens. I'm going to work with an 05 size pen. An 03 works well too. I'm going to outline the feathers with the illustration pen. So the nice thing about watercolor and ink is you don't have to necessarily trace things out perfectly. If you miss spots, or you can even add whole parts to the feather, make it look like a white edged feather, and it just looks nice on its own. What you don't want to do is go and watercolor paint over top of the ink, because even if it's waterproof ink, there is that chance that it will run and turn gray and ruin your stuff. So only ink when everything's 100% dry and you're ready to do it without watercoloring again afterwards. So let's revisit these faces next. And we're going to add some design. So all of them are going to have the same kind of facial features, which are mimicking the Byzantine style. So we're not going for realistic. So attach the nose to the eyebrow. Give yourself an almond-shaped eye. Big circles. There we go. And then they had like quite the cherub like lips. This next one's fun. It's very Zen-tangly. Let the mark go right to the end, the trunks, and then just, you make it up yourself. You do what kind of speaks to you, but use simple lines with your illustration pen and create interesting organic marks, patterns,